The sound of the waves outside our window used to calm me, but that morning, they felt heavier, like they carried a message I wasn't ready to hear. My husband, Adrian, had already left for his weekend business trip, leaving the house unusually quiet. I stood in the kitchen, letting the soft breeze from the beach filter through the curtains. It smelled of salt, coffee, and something I couldn't name, a feeling I didn't understand yet. I wasn't supposed to feel lonely. We had a beautiful home, a peaceful life, and a love that once felt effortless. But lately, the spaces between us had stretched into miles of silence. Adrian had become a man of early flights and late-night calls, while I had become a woman who watched the clock more than the sunset. That morning, the knock on the door startled me. When I opened it, I found Clara, my friend and neighbor, holding a basket of fresh muffins and her usual bright smile. "You look like you could use a little company," she said softly. Her kindness always felt like sunlight, but today it only reminded me of how cold my own heart had grown. We talked about small things, recipes, errands, the tide, but beneath her calm eyes, I sensed questions she never dared to ask. After she left, I made another cup of coffee and found myself staring at the framed photograph on the counter. Our wedding day, my hands in Adrian's, both of us laughing under the white arch. I ran my fingers over the glass, wondering when laughter had turned into polite conversation. Was it the distance, or the slow erosion of attention that happens when love gets too comfortable? The rest of the day drifted quietly. The beach shimmered, children played in the sand, and seagulls floated lazily in the sky. Yet inside, I felt like a spectator of my own life. I tried reading, then cleaning, then writing a message to Adrian, but every sentence felt forced. "Hope your flight went well," I finally sent, even though what I really wanted to ask was, "Do you still think of me when you're away?" By evening, the air had turned golden. I stepped onto the balcony, letting the last rays of sunlight touch my skin. There was beauty in that moment, the kind that makes you ache without knowing why. I closed my eyes, and for a brief second, I wished someone would ask me what I was feeling. Not to fix it, just to understand it. That was when I heard a voice behind me. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" I turned and saw Nora, our new neighbor who had moved in last month. She stood there holding a sketchbook, her hair tied loosely, eyes reflecting the same ocean that mirrored mine. She smiled politely. I didn't mean to intrude. I was just sketching the sunset from the deck next door. Something about her presence felt oddly comforting, like meeting someone who understands your silence without needing to fill it. We talked for a few minutes, mostly about the sea and her art, until she asked, "Do you ever paint?" I laughed softly. "Not anymore. I used to, though, a long time ago." As she left, she said something that lingered. "Maybe you should start again. Sometimes we lose ourselves quietly, and the only way back is through something that used to make us feel alive." Her words stayed with me long after she disappeared into her home. That night, I stood before the mirror looking at the woman staring back. My reflection didn't show sadness. It showed confusion, a longing I hadn't named. I thought about Adrian, about Clara, and about Nora's quiet observation. Maybe life was trying to tell me something through them. A message hidden between loneliness and rediscovery. When I finally lay down, the waves still whispered outside, louder than before. I didn't know if it was the sea or my own heart calling for something I had forgotten how to feel. But I knew one thing. The calm before a storm always sounds deceptively gentle. The next morning arrived with an unexpected softness. The sun peeked through the curtains, brushing warmth across my face. I wanted to start the day differently, to do something that belonged only to me. I searched the attic and found an old box labeled art supplies. The smell of dried paint and forgotten memories filled the air as I opened it. Inside were brushes, half-used tubes of color, and a sketchbook from years ago. My fingers trembled as I touched it. I carried everything to the kitchen table and began mixing shades of blue and gold. It felt strange at first, like greeting a part of myself I hadn't spoken to in years. But slowly, with every brushstroke, I felt alive again. The quiet house didn't feel so lonely anymore. It was just me, the ocean breeze, and the sound of the waves whispering like old friends. Around noon, a message popped up on my phone. It was Adrian. Meeting went long. Might not be back tomorrow. Don't wait up. Just 8 words, but each one felt like a brick added to the wall between us. I stared at the screen for a while before putting it face down. I wanted to feel angry, but all I felt was empty. Later that evening, I saw Nora again. She was sitting on the deck with her sketchbook, her bare feet brushing against the wooden floor. When she noticed me, she waved lightly. "Painting again?" she asked. I nodded. "Trying to," she smiled. "Then maybe today deserves a glass of wine." We sat together as the sun melted into the horizon, sipping quietly. She told me about her past, how she had left her corporate job to paint full-time, how people thought she was foolish, how peace had cost her everything. I listened, fascinated. There was a calmness in her words that felt like a reflection of what I had been missing. When I spoke about Adrian, I didn't realize how much I was revealing until I heard my own voice tremble. We used to be so close. I don't know when the distance began, but it feels like we live in different worlds now. Nora looked at me gently. "Sometimes love doesn't vanish. It just hides behind silence, waiting for one of you to call it back." Her words were kind, but they also cut deep. I stared at the sea, wondering if silence had already won. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too big, too empty. I walked through the hallway, my bare feet touching the cool tiles, and ended up in the kitchen. The clock ticked softly. Out of habit, I checked my phone again. No new messages. I poured myself some water, but before I could drink, I heard the faint sound of music. It was coming from next door. Nora's house. A slow, haunting melody played on the piano, gentle yet full of longing. I walked to the balcony, drawn by it. The curtains on her window were half open, and through them I saw her silhouette. She wasn't just playing. She was lost in it, eyes closed, fingers moving gracefully. The music wrapped around the night like a whisper only hearts could hear. For reasons I couldn't explain, I stayed there, listening until the last note faded. Something inside me shifted. I realized how long it had been since I'd felt anything that pure. When I finally went to bed, the melody still lingered in my mind. I thought about Adrian, far away in some hotel, probably too tired to even notice my absence. I thought about Nora, a stranger who somehow saw me more clearly than my own husband did. And somewhere between those thoughts, an unsettling question formed quietly in my heart. What if connection doesn't always wait for permission? The waves outside answered only with silence. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. The sunlight slanted across the floor, but it didn't warm me. Adrian was still away, and I found myself wandering from room to room, trying to shake a restlessness I couldn't name. I returned to my sketching, but the colors felt muted, the brush dragging like it carried the weight of my thoughts. By mid-afternoon, I decided to take a walk along the beach. The sand was cool under my feet, and the sea stretched endlessly before me, indifferent to my worries. I thought about how Adrian and I used to walk together here, talking about nothing, laughing until our sides ached. Those walks now felt like echoes of a past life, and I wondered if I would ever feel that simplicity again. When I returned, the house was unusually quiet. Nora had gone out, probably to paint somewhere new. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to focus on my sketches, but my mind kept wandering. Then I heard it, the soft creak of Adrian's bedroom door opening. My heart skipped. He shouldn't be back yet. Curiosity tugged at me, and I moved closer, peeking into the room. There he was, sitting on the edge of his bed, a book in hand but not reading. His shoulders were relaxed, yet there was a tension I hadn't noticed before. Something had shifted. Maybe it was the way he seemed, smaller in my absence. Or maybe it was the realization that I'd been feeling this pull toward him, even when he was so near. I didn't intend to linger, but my feet betrayed me. I stepped inside. "Adrian," I whispered, and he looked up, surprised. His gaze softened when he saw me. "Clara, you're home early," he said, though his tone carried an unspoken question. We talked, at first lightly, about the day, the weather, nothing substantial, but beneath the words, There was something unspoken threading between us. Each glance lingered just a second too long. Each accidental brush of a hand sent a current through me I couldn't ignore. The room felt smaller, warmer, charged in a way I had never noticed before. For a moment, we sat in silence. Then he leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Clara, do you ever feel like we're drifting?" His voice was low, hesitant. My chest tightened. "Every day," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "And yet, every day, I feel closer to you when you're not around." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for my sketchbook, flipping it open. He studied the sketches with quiet admiration. "These are incredible," he said finally. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw the reflection of emotions I had tried so hard to ignore. The air between us thickened, charged with a dangerous intimacy. I knew where this could lead, and yet my heart pounded with anticipation. It was as though every step closer was pulling me into a current I could no longer resist. I wanted to speak, to explain myself, but the words caught in my throat. Before I could stop myself, our hands brushed while I reached for the pencil. That fleeting touch sent a jolt through me, awakening desires I had buried deep. My eyes met his, and in that gaze, there was recognition. Silent, potent, and utterly undeniable. Suddenly, a knock at the door shattered the fragile moment. Nora's voice called softly from the hallway. "Clara, are you still here?" My heart lurched. We pulled apart instinctively, the tension hanging in the air like smoke. Adrian ran a hand down his face, a mixture of relief and frustration etched into his expression. I stepped back, attempting to compose myself. But the room felt different now. Smaller, heavier, alive with unspoken truths. Adrian met my eyes once more, and in that glance, I saw the same internal struggle mirrored there. The pull toward me, the weight of restraint, and the undeniable desire simmering beneath the surface. I left the room quietly, my pulse racing. The hallway felt endless, the walls closing in as I tried to collect my thoughts. I didn't know how we had come to this, how a lifetime of trust, familiarity, and family had twisted into something dangerous and irresistible. That evening, I returned to my room to find a note slipped under the door. It was from Adrian. "We need to talk, tonight, alone." My hands shook as I read it. Part of me wanted to ignore it, pretend nothing had shifted, but a stronger, unyielding part of me knew that whatever happened next would change everything. As night fell, the house grew silent. I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of the waves outside, each crash a reminder that calm is always temporary, and that storms often arrive when least expected. I didn't know what words he would speak, what choices I would make, or if we could ever return to the life we had known. All I knew was that by nightfall, everything would shift, and nothing would ever be the same again. Night had settled over the house like a heavy, expectant blanket. The waves outside whispered softly, but inside my pulse thudded like a drum. The note from Adrian had been simple, yet it carried the weight of everything unspoken between us. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself I was ready for honesty, yet my stomach twisted with nerves. I knocked lightly on his bedroom door, my hand trembling despite the calm I tried to project. "Adrian, it's me," I whispered. The door opened, and there he was, tall, composed, but with a vulnerability in his eyes that made my heart ache. He gestured for me to enter, and the room immediately felt smaller, warmer, charged with the unspoken intensity that had been building between us for months. We sat on the edge of the bed, silence stretching between us. I wanted to speak, to explain the tangle of emotions that had grown in my chest, but every word felt inadequate. Finally, he broke the quiet. "Clara, I don't know where to start. I've tried to ignore this, whatever this is, but I can't, not anymore." My heart leapt and sank all at once. I wanted to tell him that I felt the same, that the pull between us had been impossible to deny, but guilt lingered like a shadow. "Adrian, I've tried too. I thought, maybe I could push it away, pretend it didn't exist." My voice trembled. He reached for my hand. The warmth of his palm was grounding, yet electrifying. "I don't want to hurt anyone, especially not Nora, but there's this connection between us that can't be ignored. Can you feel it too? His eyes searched mine, and in that gaze I saw everything I had been feeling. Longing, confusion, fear, and a fragile hope. I nodded, unable to speak, letting my hand rest in his. The weight of unspoken truths pressed down, yet at the same time it was liberating. We had both acknowledged it. The undeniable pull that had grown silently for months. Then came the softest sound of all. The door downstairs opening, followed by Nora's voice calling gently, almost tentatively, as though sensing the tension even from afar. My chest tightened, and Adrian and I exchanged a glance full of silent understanding. There was no turning back from what had begun, but we also had to tread carefully, aware of the lives intertwined with ours. For a long moment, we sat together, hands clasped, breathing synchronized. The world outside ceased to exist. It was only this fragile bubble of honesty and emotion, precarious and powerful. I leaned closer, feeling the warmth of him, the steady presence that had become my anchor. And for the first time in weeks, I felt completely alive, even as fear lingered on the edges. "We can't pretend anymore," I whispered, my forehead resting against his. "We need to face this, carefully, but honestly." His hand cupped my cheek gently, his thumb brushing softly over my skin. "I know," he said. "I don't have all the answers, but I know we can't ignore this. Whatever comes next, we face it together, not alone." The air in the room shifted, heavier yet lighter at the same time. Tension, longing, and hope swirled together, creating a delicate balance between risk and relief. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, a turbulent mix of emotions we could no longer avoid. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and urgent, mingling with Adrian's steady rhythm. Every breath, every glance, every subtle touch carried a message deeper than words. And in that small, intense space, I understood something fundamental. Love isn't always tidy or easy. Sometimes it's messy, unexpected, and even forbidden. But that doesn't make it any less real. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. It was impossible to tell. We spoke softly, honestly, laying bare the complexities of our feelings. Nothing was resolved, nothing promised. But everything was acknowledged. The fragile honesty between us felt like a lifeline, offering a path forward amidst the chaos of what had already happened. Eventually, the night grew still, and I found myself retreating to my room. Adrian stayed behind for a few moments, gathering himself, before finally slipping into his own space. The house was quiet again, yet the energy had changed, weighty, charged, alive. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every glance, every touch, every word. And then I thought of Nora, of her calm, perceptive presence, of the unspoken understanding she had offered without judgment. I realized that the lives we lead are complex, full of intersecting paths and tangled emotions. What mattered now wasn't perfection or clarity. It was honesty, courage, and the willingness to face reality, no matter how uncomfortable. The next morning would bring choices, consequences, and conversations that might be difficult, even painful. But for the first time in months, I felt a strange serenity. Adrian and I had acknowledged the truth of what we felt. The future remained uncertain, but at least we would face it consciously, not blindly. Love, I realized, is never simple, but it is always worth confronting. And sometimes, the most profound connections are the ones we never expect, yet can no longer deny.